There is a specific, agonizing silence that follows the worst moment of your entire life. It is not a peaceful silence. It is the deafening, suffocating quiet that fills the room right after the shrill ring of a telephone in the dead of the night violently tears your universe apart. You pick up the receiver, your heart pounding against your ribs, and a voice on the other end delivers the impossible, world-shattering news: a horrific, mangled car crash on a wet highway. A sudden, massive heart attack out of nowhere. A devastating, aggressive illness that took them in a matter of days, completely defying every doctor's prediction. Someone you love with every single fiber of your being, someone who was young, vibrant, full of dreams, and incredibly good, is simply gone. The shock is so heavy, so absolute, that you cannot even pull air into your lungs. The world keeps spinning, the sun keeps rising, the traffic outside your window keeps moving, but your personal timeline has violently stopped. And after the initial, paralyzing shock begins to wear off, after the brutal reality of the funeral sets in, after the casket is lowered into the cold earth and the crowds of weeping people finally go back to their normal lives, you are left entirely alone in an empty house. And in that dark, heavy solitude, a furious, burning question rises up from the very bottom of your shattered heart. Why? Why would a loving, all-powerful God allow such a good, pure person to be ripped away from this earth so violently and so soon? Before we uncover the shocking, divine answer to this agonizing mystery, I need to ask you to do something absolutely crucial right now. The devil specifically uses the tragedy of sudden death to completely destroy the faith of grieving families, whispering the lethal lie that God is either incredibly cruel or simply does not exist. We are building a massive global spiritual army to fight back against this demonic despair and to bring the life-saving, forgotten truths of the Catholic mystics directly to the mothers, fathers, and spouses who are weeping in the dark. I'm asking you to subscribe to this channel and hit the like button right now. Make it impossible for the enemy to hide this heavy spiritual armor from you when you need it the most. And to prove that our global community will not be shattered by the tragedies of this temporary world, go down to the comments right now and declare where you are standing your ground. Tell me exactly what city and what country you are watching from today. Hit subscribe, drop your location in the comments to join the ranks, and let us step together into the profound, mind-altering mystery of divine providence. The pain of this specific loss is magnified 1,000 times over by the sheer, undeniable injustice that you see every single time you walk out of your front door. You look down your street, you turn on the evening news, and you see wicked, cruel, and selfish men living comfortably into their late 80s and 90s. You see corrupt politicians, ruthless criminals, and people who openly mock the laws of God enjoying perfect physical health, total luxury, and long, prosperous lives. They never seem to suffer. They never seem to experience the devastating tragedies that tear faithful families apart. Yet the person you loved, the person who went to Mass, the person who gave their time to the poor, the young child who had their entire beautiful life ahead of them, is buried in the ground under a cold stone. The stark contrast between the long life of the wicked and the tragic, sudden death of the innocent feels like a literal, physical punch to the chest. It feels like a massive betrayal. If God is perfectly just, why does the architecture of human life seem so incredibly rigged in favor of the bad guys? When you are drowning in this specific type of agonizing grief, the secular world and even well-meaning members of the church have absolutely nothing to offer you but empty, useless platitudes. They will pat you on the back at the funeral reception and say things that actually make the pain significantly worse. They will tell you that God just needed another angel in heaven. They will look at a grieving mother and say that heaven was missing a beautiful flower, so God came down and picked the best one. When your heart is bleeding, when your family is completely destroyed, and when your children are crying out for their father, these poetic Hallmark card phrases sound like an absolute insult to your intelligence. If God is entirely self-sufficient, if He is the creator of the entire cosmos, why on earth would He brutally tear a mother away from her young children just because He needed her up there? The human mind immediately revolts against this logic. It paints God not as a loving father, but as a selfish tyrant who steals our loved ones just to decorate his own kingdom. This is exactly where the enemy makes his move. The devil sits heavily on your shoulder as you stare at the empty chair at your dining table, and he whispers the most devastating, logical lie of all. He tells you that there is no grand plan. He tells you that your prayers were a pathetic waste of breath, and that life is just a chaotic, meaningless lottery of biology, physics, and bad luck. He points to the horrific details of the accident or the suddenness of the illness, and he uses that as absolute, undeniable proof that heaven is completely closed and that nobody is listening. He wants you to believe that the sudden death was a mistake, a tragic glitch in the system that God somehow failed to prevent. This specific temptation of grief, this suffocating feeling of being abandoned by the Creator in your darkest hour, is the exact reason why millions of devout, faithful believers quietly walk away from the altar, abandon their rosaries, and never return to the sacraments. The pain of the perceived injustice is simply too heavy to carry without a real, solid answer. But what if I told you that you are looking at the entire tapestry of human existence from the completely wrong side? What if the sudden, tragic death that looks like an absolute failure of divine protection on earth is actually the most aggressive, calculated, and breathtaking act of supernatural rescue in the history of the universe? You do not have to settle for cheap, poetic answers to your grief. Jesus Christ did not leave his church in the dark regarding this ultimate agony. To understand the terrifying and beautiful logic of sudden death, we have to open the profound, private revelations of Saint Bridget of Sweden. Saint Bridget was not a stranger to human suffering. She understood the crushing weight of the human condition intimately, and she possessed a fierce, unrelenting spirit. She did not just passively accept the mystery of suffering with a bowed head. She took the collective, bleeding heartbreak of every grieving mother, father, and spouse, and she brought it directly to the throne of the Almighty. She essentially demanded to know why the good die young and the wicked prosper. Christ did not respond to Bridget with a vague puzzle or a confusing theological riddle. He opened the heavy veil of eternity and showed her the absolute, terrifying mechanics of the human timeline. He revealed that our human perspective is completely crippled by our earthly obsession with time. We believe that a long life of 80 or 90 years on this earth is the ultimate blessing, and that dying at 20 or 30 is a cosmic tragedy. But Jesus Christ does not measure the success of a human life by the number of breaths a person takes, or by the money they accumulate, or by the earthly milestones they achieve. He measures the success of a human life by one metric, and one metric only, which is their readiness for the eternal kingdom. As we transition into the second block of this profound revelation, you are going to discover the shocking reality of the spiritual pivot point. Jesus explained to Saint Bridget exactly why he allows the wicked to live until their hair turns gray, and why he reaches down and stops the heartbeat of a good, devout person at the very peak of their earthly life. Prepare to have everything you thought you knew about life, death, and tragedy completely turned upside down. When we look at a human life, we look through the incredibly narrow, limited keyhole of earthly time. We assume that living to be 90 years old is the absolute ultimate victory, and dying at 20 or 30 is a horrific, unnatural failure. But Jesus Christ completely shattered this earthly illusion for Saint Bridget. He told her to imagine a master gardener walking through a massive, beautiful field of flowers. A human gardener does not wait for a perfect blossoming rose to wither, turn brown, and completely rot before he cuts the stem and brings it inside his house. He picks the flower at the exact, precise microsecond of its absolute greatest beauty and perfection. He cuts it so that it can be preserved and admired at its absolute peak. Jesus revealed to Saint Bridget that human souls operate on the exact same spiritual logic. When a young, devout, and pure person is suddenly taken from this earth, it is not because God was angry, and it is certainly not because he was simply absent or distracted. It is because their soul had reached the absolute glowing peak of sanctifying grace. They were completely ready for the beatific vision, and God simply harvested the fruit before the harsh winter of the world could destroy it. But this beautiful analogy of the flower is only half of the breathtaking truth. The other half is a terrifying reality about human free will and the absolute, terrifying fragility of the human soul. You see, we only possess the ability to look at the past and the present. We look at the young man who died in a car crash, or the young mother who collapsed from a sudden illness, and we say, they were so good, they had a brilliant future, they were going to do amazing things for the family. But God does not just see the past and the present. God stands completely outside of time. He possesses absolute, perfect foreknowledge. He sees the entire unwritten timeline of that young person's future with terrifying clarity. And what Jesus revealed to Saint Bridget is the most profound, comforting, and shocking truth a grieving mother or wife could ever possibly hear. God takes the good, the pure, and the innocent at a young age specifically because he sees the horrific spiritual dangers that were waiting for them in the dark hidden corridors of their future. Jesus explained that if he had allowed that beloved young person to live another year or another 5 years or to reach the comfortable old age of 80, they would have been completely destroyed by the world. God saw the exact future moment where that young man would have met the wrong group of friends. He saw the future moment where the acquisition of sudden wealth, a new job, or secular success would have completely poisoned his heart with massive spiritual pride. He saw the impending, lethal temptation that the young person would simply not have had the spiritual strength to resist. He saw the slow, subtle decay of their faith. He saw that if they lived just one more year, they would have committed a mortal sin, completely abandoned the Catholic faith, and ultimately lost their eternal salvation forever. God loved that soul way too much to let the devil win. He refused to let them walk off the edge of the cliff, so, in an act of violent, aggressive, and terrifying mercy, God stepped into human history and stopped the clock. The world looks at the sudden, violent car accident or the devastating, aggressive cancer and screams that it is a meaningless, chaotic tragedy. But from the vantage point of eternity, it was not a tragedy at all. It was a surgical, emergency rescue mission. God literally snatched that soul from the very edge of the abyss, right before the ground gave way beneath their feet. He locked in their eternal salvation at the exact millisecond they were in a state of grace. The sudden death that broke your heart and made you question the very existence of God was actually the absolute, undeniable proof of His fierce, overprotective love for your family member. He was completely willing to endure your anger. He was completely willing to let you misunderstand Him and even hate Him for taking them away so soon, just so He could ensure that your loved one would not burn in the fires of hell. That is the true definition of a perfect Father. He willingly takes the blame and the hatred on earth to guarantee the absolute victory in heaven. If you are listening to this right now and you are carrying the heavy, agonizing cross of an unjust grief, I need you to let this revelation sink deeply into your bones. The devil desperately wants you to look at the empty bedroom and feel nothing but despair, bitterness, and absolute depression. He wants you to think that the story was cut short and violently ruined. But Saint Bridget is telling you that the story was not ruined. It was perfectly, masterfully completed. Your son, your daughter, or your husband did not miss out on the best parts of life. They were entirely spared from the worst parts of the spiritual war. They were evacuated from a battlefield where they were inevitably going to fall and be captured by the enemy. You are crying because you wanted them to experience the temporary, fleeting joys of this broken earth for a few more decades. But God gave them the eternal, unquenchable, mind-blowing ecstasy of heaven right now, completely bypassing the massive risks of the world. He hid them in the shadow of His wings before the storm could completely destroy them. But this massive, comforting revelation inevitably leads to a massive, infuriating question that still burns in the back of our minds. If God takes the good and the pure early to protect them from future sin and damnation, why on earth does He allow the wicked, the cruel, and the corrupt to live until they are 90 years old? Why do the worst people in the world, the politicians who mock God and the criminals who destroy families, seem to possess a supernatural immunity to tragedy? If God is pruning the garden to save the beautiful flowers, why does He let the poisonous weeds grow so tall and live so incredibly long? As we move into the third and final block of this profound spiritual documentary, you are going to discover the terrifying, chilling reason why the wicked constantly prosper. Jesus revealed the absolute curse of a long, comfortable life for a sinner and why you should never, under any circumstances, envy the old age of a man who mocks God. When you are standing in a quiet cemetery looking down at the fresh grave of someone who was incredibly young and completely innocent, the devil will inevitably walk up right behind you and point his finger at the rest of the world. He will point to the sprawling mansions of corrupt billionaires who exploit the poor. He will point to the ruthless, arrogant politicians who openly mock the laws of God and yet enjoy absolute, untouched power. He will point to the selfish, wicked men who live in perfect physical health, well into their late 80s and 90s, completely surrounded by luxury and earthly comfort. The enemy will whisper into your ear, "Look at them. Look at how long they get to live. Look at how much they get to enjoy. If your God is so incredibly just, and if He truly loved your family, why did He violently cut your loved one's life short, while He allows the absolute worst people on earth to live so incredibly long?" It is the ultimate paralyzing paradox of human existence. But Jesus Christ completely destroyed this demonic argument when He opened the terrifying reality of divine justice to Saint Bridget of Sweden. Jesus revealed that when we look at a wicked man enjoying a long, prosperous, and perfectly healthy life, we are not looking at a blessing. We are actually looking at the most terrifying, chilling curse in the entire universe. You see, God is perfectly, infinitely just. His justice demands that absolutely no good deed goes unrewarded and absolutely no sin goes unpunished. Even the most corrupt, wicked, and unrepentant man on earth has done some minor, natural good during his lifetime. Perhaps the ruthless criminal gave a coin to a beggar on the street 20 years ago. Perhaps the arrogant politician showed a moment of genuine affection to his dog or his children. Because this wicked man has ultimately chosen his own pride over God, and because he will spend his entire eternity burning in the absolute despair of hell, God cannot and will not reward him in the next life. Therefore, God's perfect justice dictates that the wicked man must receive his entire reward right here, in the dirt of this temporary earth. His massive wealth, his perfect physical health, and his long, comfortable life of 90 years are not signs of God's favor. They are his severance package. That long life is the only heaven he will ever experience. God is simply paying him back for his minor good deeds on earth, exhausting his heavenly account down to the very last penny, so that when he finally closes his eyes in death, the books are completely balanced and he plunges into the abyss with absolutely nothing left. Saint Bridget saw that God also extends the lives of these wicked men out of a terrifying, exhaustive mercy. He gives them 80 or 90 years, letting the sand in the hourglass run completely out, giving them every possible, conceivable chance to fall on their knees and repent. But when they stubbornly refuse, year after year, decade after decade, their long life simply becomes a massive accumulation of divine wrath. They are not being blessed by their long years on earth. They are simply being fattened for the slaughter. They are comfortable, yes, but they are comfortable on a conveyor belt that is heading straight into the eternal fire. When you finally understand this absolute, mind-altering reality, the tragic death of your pure, faithful loved one completely changes its shape. It stops being a tragedy, and it transforms into an epic, breathtaking triumph. Your loved one did not get the 80 years of earthly comfort because they did not need the earthly severance package. Their reward was not a temporary house or a fleeting bank account. Their reward was the infinite, unquenchable, mind-blowing ecstasy of the beatific vision. God saw that they were ready. He saw the future traps the devil had laid out for them, and he aggressively pulled them out of the war zone. He locked them securely in the eternal vault where no demon, no sickness, and no temptation can ever touch them again. We are living in a generation that is completely blinded by the illusion of this temporary world. We measure the success of a human life by the dates carved on a tombstone, and we completely forget that we are immortal souls trapped in a brutal, temporary spiritual war. This channel is entirely dedicated to ripping off that blindfold and arming you with the heavy, forgotten, and life-saving truths of the Catholic mystics. If this message has finally brought peace to your shattered heart today, if it has lifted the crushing weight of injustice off your shoulders and given you a fierce, burning hope for the eternal souls of those you love, I am asking you to stand with us on the front lines. Please consider becoming a member of this channel right now. For just $2 a month, an amount so unbelievably small that it is less than the price of a cheap cup of coffee, you become a crucial, foundational pillar of this massive mission. Your membership gives you access to exclusive members-only videos where we dive even deeper into the mechanics of divine providence, the afterlife, and the hidden strategies of the enemy. But most importantly, your $2 keeps the lights on and allows us to broadcast this exact life-saving video to a mother or a father who is sitting in a hospital waiting room today, completely ready to give up on God. Please click the join button below, swallow your grief, and help us broadcast this ultimate hope to a world drowning in despair. Do not let the devil steal another second of your peace. Do not let him convince you that your loved one was cheated out of a good life. They were not cheated. They won the ultimate lottery of the universe. They completely bypassed the agonizing decay of old age, the endless betrayals of this world, and the terrifying risk of losing their eternal salvation. The empty chair at your dining table is not a monument to God's absence. It is the absolute, undeniable proof of his fierce, overprotective, and urgent mercy. God loved them too much to leave them in the trenches for 1 second longer than necessary. So dry your tears, lift up your head, and stop looking at the grave as a place of defeat. It is simply the doorway they walked through to get home before the storm hit. Your mission on this earth is not over. You are still in the trenches. You still have to fight the devil, you still have to carry your cross, and you still have to finish your own race. Pick up your rosary, thank God for his terrifying, perfect rescue mission, and get back to work. Your loved one is completely safe in the arms of the Savior, waiting for you to finish the battle and join them in the light.